Ambassador Emmanuel Mamba,
Oh,
and Mr. Sanderson. Is it Sanderson? Sanders. Dante Sanders.
Dante, the clad man. It was an interesting panel.
Oh yes. But I'm more excited about tonight's topic. It's more appealing. I don't know why. It's related corruption.
Because we're a technocrat. That panel was very technical.
Yeah.
I was looking at it, I laughed.
How's it sound? Let me ask Edwin.
Yeah, sure.
From that one, eh? Or maybe we needed to put all of them.
We'll put 4.
So they are chargeables,
Yes.
the mics. Help me with one. I'll put another one here.
I didn't know about that program, and I've watched it. I would have loved to watch it.
Oh,
I think it's still there on Facebook, no?
yes,
sir?
it is.
It's on. Comrade Emmanuel is very busy lately, extremely busy.
He really is positioning himself.
Working.
Yeah.
This time, can take some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere something's happening. Is there? I don't even know how he knows something is about to happen.
Oh yes.
He's working very hard.
He's positioning himself.
No.
But it's a very hostile system in there where he is.
Very, very hostile. But I can see it's cracking from within there. Those audios they've started releasing, they would just crash themselves.
Yes.
Yes. They'll crash themselves because those are senior people who are insulting each other publicly.
Sure.
So that is already creating rifts and camps. So maybe that is his opportunity.
But how is he handling it with a big man? Because he's still.
The ex. Yeah, that's where the challenge is because that man is.
Whoever you anoint will go through.
Yeah, that man wants Brian.
Wants Brian. And he's been working with Brian for a long while. That thing he produced, the story about himself, I saw a few days ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was already, I think, a way of beginning to launder his image. But so far, there hasn't been any sinister stories around him. So
Around him.
maybe stands a chance.
But the biggest challenge I think he has is I don't think he's aggressive for
No, he's not.
what he's looking for.
No,
It
he's
doesn't
not.
suit him.
He doesn't take media interviews. He's media shy. So
No. You'll sink, and I think people have seen he will sink it.
yeah. Man was a bit aggressive. You know that he's media friendly.
Emmanuel. Emmanuel should have never gone out.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a good friend of mine.
Okay. He should have stayed.
He should have stayed.
And the others. Stop children number 1.
Any feedback from him?
He sent a message that let me just wrap up with the news.
Is it 20, 30 or 20 hours?
It's 20 hours. But I know that they might be overrunning a little bit with news.
Okay. It will be good as we are waiting.
Oh yeah. Oh, which downstairs? Southern Sun Hotel. Yes, I actually even sent you a message to say it's the interview is from Southern Sun Hotel. Yes, Famosi Paliage, the former Ridgeway Hotel. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. He went to the office.
Who's that?
The other gentleman, Chiwemwe.
Oh.
I don't know how, but I sent him a message, just like I sent to you.
How you've managed to penetrate the system. Maybe you are aggressive.
We are trying.
You're not trying.
You're
You're aggressive.
No, thank
KBN.
Thank you. It's your support that makes us.
Extremely aggressive.
It's your support. If this brand was in the hands of people with money, it would have been a big one. But it's still in the hands of people who are trying to find their feet.
If it was in what you are saying, it wouldn't have taken off. It's in the right hands. No, these people who have got so much. I don't know how God has made us as human beings. When you have much, you also lack other things. You lack aggression. Have you ever seen a person who's rich who's aggressive?
Yeah, you're right.
Like in terms of, it's difficult.
You are right. In Bemba we say Ululumbirwa Mulanda.
Kakata.
Kakata.
No, you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
How do you see the post fitting in there?
In this dispensation, it will be a perfect fit in terms of right now, of course, the news diggers is doing it. Now, pairing Uncle Bob. Hello? Hello, Uncle Bob. Oh, really? Okay, so I pick. Yeah, okay, we're at Southern Sun. Okay. Hi, Tapelo. Hi. You can hear when Barnabas talking. You can't hear me. Yes, I'm on the phone. And very much next to a microphone.
Is it green?
Okay. Anyway, finish the news and let us know. Sound-wise, the picture is okay. The aircon shouldn't be on. Is it making noise? No, we figured out. It's to my little lights. We have actually switched them off. Yeah, the small lights, they were making noise, so we switched them off. We've just remained with the fluorescent tubes. The aircon, no. Anyway, first test the sound there, then you let us know. Okay. This Chinga is also running slightly. What were you saying before?
About the post. How do you see them fitting it?
So, at the rate we are going with this government, you need a very strong private media. Right now, there's just the diggers and maybe us and the mast, because Prime TV is ZNBC now.
And so is movie.
So it's moving. Diamond, because of what is hanging on their shoulders, they are trying to be pro.
They have been. Like me, they don't feature me.
Yeah. Or they don't.
I don't know why.
Yeah. So they are really trying to be pro. So there's a need for another strong voice. If the post could come back, then we'll be safe. Even as
How different will it be from the master?
uh, Right.
Yeah. I will talk about that. Yes, sir. I know CBU and everything. I lectured there sometime. But I know you're from CBU, right?
You saying let's try? You're with him? Okay, so let's get the mics as they're supposed to be then.
Hello? I think, okay, let me, just send me hi for WhatsApp so that I send you the link.
So two mics there and two mics there.
Sometime.
Very
President
good.
is all right. The president.
No.
I think you stood in Lusaka for one time.
Yes, Lusaka Central, 2016.
So it is checking.
I think the person who introduced me said,
Edwin, tell us if you can hear us.
Zip's president?
Yes,
Something?
I was Zip's president.
Yes, that's what you said. That's our Zip's president. He spoke very highly of you.
Who?
I don't know, I've forgotten the name.
Okay.
And he posted even on Facebook on my wall.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Edwin.
Chibamolo.
Can you hear us now? He's using a new link, not the one I sent to you. So,
What's on the picture?
what's on the picture? Can you see us? We are seated. They're just chairs.
It's an odd link. So let's just.
Okay, I'm sending you a new link now.
Let me just get the new link.
Okay. You're sending?
So for procurement, yes, yeah,
I've sent
using the
Him.
number
Yes,
8,
let me
2020.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You sent just now to him.
Yes, I've sent.
Okay, Zambia, you repeal so many acts. You never know
Oh,
which
yeah.
one is up to date. It could be a 2021 one.
This is the one, yeah.
Okay.
Edwin.
Out of interest,
Edwin. Edwin. A bit louder.
that act is
Huh?
it's got a lot of power in it. I don't know how even though
That's the greatest problem we have. There's a lot of powers, but nobody to implement it. That's what the greatest problem we have actually.
Oh, but
I've never looked at it until now.
We're
Yeah.
just talking briefly and
Briefly,
Yeah.
in my chat, the last program was still talking.
Oh.
I think my sound is okay.
Yeah.
So, like when you investigate, how far do you go?
That's it. That's
When
it.
Do you even
investigate
arrest?
Eddie, testing 1, 2.
No, who's supposed to investigate?
I saw in the act you have got power to even investigate.
Okay, so first I can-
Who's who?
Eddie, testing 1, 2.
Until the procurement guru.
No. When you say investigate, which department are you? Which
It's
are
the authority.
ZPPA?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello?
Because ZIPs and ZPPA have different.
Okay, I'm taking you as in your field. Me, this is not my field.
Okay.
So I'm taking you as you people, the procurement
yeah,
people.
like
So that's why I'm
Mamaki.
saying you.
Oh,
I
okay.
am looking at it from in.
Yes, the only problem is ZPPA,
You are good, not the arm
the
that's here.
regulator. You cannot be the
So let him do all the lower things.
Okay, so you do the lower things for the names.
So,
I'm sure you know.
government structure.
And the topic.
That issue is missing.
And the topic.
Nobody's there to come in to manage it. That's what it
Oh,
is.
really?
That's what I will start talking about. So like, I mean, if you can do that,
Ed,
there are a number of things that can be better. Without that, it's very difficult to manage corruption. Yeah.
who?
Um,
I don't know. No. I think he was on his way coming better.
We are set to go.
That's it.
Just waiting for
Uncle Big.
Uncle Bob.
Yeah, Uncle Bob. Thank you.
Uncle Bob, how are you?
All right, thanks.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ever fresh.
Excuse me. This is that I could eat. Oh, guys. Good heavens. There's a lot of heavy traffic on our road, especially now because of
These are the microphones.
the vehicles that are coming from Sonoma.
Which one is yours now? I'm trying to
You know, they normally travel a lot at night.
Oh.
Because of the cement.
Oh yeah. They're not paying us. We remove the labels
Wow.
from Wi-Fi. They're not
Can't be
paying
marketing
us.
for them. When
They're not giving you courtesies.
Can remove that one also.
remove it until let me see.
What we can do is, are you gonna use this?
You can negotiate with them to say, look, whenever we use you, can we make sure that you provide us with free water?
Okay, gentlemen, I think we are
Okay, sir.
ready to go. We can run.
I tell you where I met you
Mhm.
when after the report.
Ah, okay.
That's where I invest.
Okay.
Somewhere along Cairo Road.
All right.
Computers.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yes. That's good.
Yes, good.
Okay.
My father-in-law,
Yes,
Mr. Ujad.
yes. In fact, that's where I remember you from. Now you've got your brothers-in-law there. They're your fathers-in-law now. Yeah.
Right.
Is the light okay?
This one?
Yeah. So the eye?
Yeah, for us it's okay. Council, how are you? Fine, Council. I'm just about to go on air right now. Can I call you back after the program? Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. Thanks.
You raised some very good questions, but I think we need to just be sure that we can be able to
Right.
fill them because they're all pertinent, very pertinent in terms of what.
Yes. So normally what we'll do is, if I raise one, I'll give you an opportunity or two. Yeah.
You are in public procurement. Public Procurement Act 2008.
2000, no,
2020.
2020.
2020.
No, that's a new one.
Yes,
2008 is what established the PPA.
yes, but it's also there in the current one.
Yeah, they've incorporated most of it.
Yes,
but that what they went to the decentralization, where they said now the ministries can procure on their own, was the 2008 one.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But that has changed now, right?
It has changed now to the new one that they did, but
the problem is still there.
the problem is still there because until you deal with the rigidities of the law itself and the practice, more importantly, the
Yes.
practice.
Yes.
Is that the 2020, the Act?
2016?
The one you put that down?
No. I was looking for it. I didn't find it quickly enough, so I just decided to leave it. I remember them off my head.
It's not the white. Just wait for fast to be ready. It's not bad. Tell me when you're ready. On the outside.
Okay. Hello there, good evening and welcome to State of the Nation on KBN. This is channel 102 on the Topstar Bouquet. And of course, for those of you that are catching us live on DSTV, We are on channel 279. But of course, we are not forgetting those that are in transit. You don't have to miss on this particular exciting program. And so you can like KBN TV on Facebook and join the conversation. Tonight on State of the Nation, we are discussing public procurement and corruption. So my name is Kenneth Mambwe, your host on State of the Nation, and I'm delighted to be introducing a very distinguished panel that is going to help us discuss this very important topic. And so please indulge me as I introduce my guest panelists tonight. On my immediate left is Mr. Chiwe Mwelwa, who is a procurement consultant. And next to him is a man that needs no introduction, Mr. Robert, we call him Bob, Uncle Bob, Robert Sichinga, a former minister. He's been serving, in various portfolios, and he will talk about that as we go ahead, with the program. And of course, on my far left is the president of EFF. That is President Kasonde Mwenda. So this is a very formidable team that is going to help us dissect the topic for tonight: public procurement and corruption. Gentlemen, welcome to State of the Nation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on the program. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now, for starters, let's start with the consultant to set the tone, the procurement consultant. Can you just quickly, under a minute, tell us, the importance of procurement in general within the scope of, national development, if I may put it that way?
Thank you, Pastor. I'll call you Pastor.
That's all right.
Pastor.
That's right.
Okay, the procurement is very, very critical to the development of a nation. If we look at the world, even the World Bank has actually issued some documentation where they're actually saying, because of the COVID that we have at the moment, the climate changes that we have at the moment, and many other issues that come out of the supply chain, you find that the GDP, world GDP, will be about 5.5. They're actually saying this year to be about 4.6, and next year about 3.2. So globally, so we're going to have a problem in economic development. Bringing that to Zambia, we have a very big problem. Our GDP, even as we are was even in the negative. We have a very big problem that, in my view, we think that procurement has a role to play. When you look at our GDP in this country, for example, 15% of our GDP is actually public procurement. Okay. When you look at 30% of our GDP in Zambia is merchandising, which is basically, the folks that are buying from ShopRite, that from game stores, those guys that are buying materials, they're selling in Zambia. Put together, 50% of GDP is procurement. Okay. So when you look at the national budget that the minister announces every time in Parliament, the Minister of Finance, that amount, when you remove the salaries, 70% of that budget is procurement. So it is the procurement of medicine, procurement of roads, procurement of fertilizer, procurement of petroleum. Most people think it's procurement of bottles or like that. The whole nation really depends. 70% of that is actually procurement. When we move on to other aspects as well, before I end this process, is that the role of procurement is very critical in private sector as well. We only look at the mines, for instance, Pastor. The mines, when they're developing copper, let me give an example of copper. You see, the cost of producing that copper, the price is determined by London Metal Exchange. The cost of producing it is 80% of that cost procurement. So the profitability of the mines contributing to the national budget, which is there in the current budget, is that procurement is a factor in there, because it is 70 to 80% of cost of producing it, procurement. It's a procurement of materials, a procurement of the equipment that is used in the mining activities. When you look at your austerity measures that even President HH and whoever mentioned there, the role of that, success of that, is really does depend on procurement. So when you notice that if we do not manage Dr. Msokotane himself said, because this year are going to pay our debt, right? So he said 10% of that budget is going to go to development of the nation. The other one, 90%, is going to pay the debt. Now, that 10%, 70% of that 10% is procurement.
Procurement. Uncle Bob,
Right.
70% of the national budget is procurement. 80% of profitability of the mines, according to the expert here, is procurement. Isn't it no wonder we can talk about corruption to the extent that the bulk of the cake is being spent on procuring goods and services?
No, I think that first of all, let me concur with Mwelwa, that the issue of any business, including that of government, has definitely got a serious and significant impact on any system that you can think of. Because the procurement that has just been mentioned is not just of goods per se, but how about services? In fact, if you look at the Zambian debt that has been made reference to, the bulk of that was to do with the procurement of capital projects. In other words, the construction of the roads, the bridges, locomotives, and motor vehicles, and you name it. It's all in there. Now, it's also important to understand that when we talk of a budget and a country that is import-oriented like ours is, what are you importing? And as you will recall, and you introduced this, you said this in your introduction, I was in charge of trade, commerce, and industry, so I am quite familiar with the levels of procurement that is necessary to sustain these operations of any company and government. So when you connect that corruption will tend to follow where the money is. Hence, if you're talking about 80% of 70%, then you're talking of a significant figure. So clearly, this is vulnerable, if you want, to corruption. Let's just give one example in terms of the government programs. The biggest government program in the country is the Farmer Import Support Program, FISIP. And you're aware that a lot of that has to do with the procurement of fertilizers, a lot of it from outside. And even what is produced locally, you have to bring in the materials from outside in order to be able to produce what the best of fertilizers. And that alone, and just to take the case when I was Minister of Agriculture, just in 2013-2014 season, that alone was chewing up, if you want, a significant amount, well in excess of $100 million US. So it becomes a huge responsibility, and because of what took place once the 2008 Public Procurement Act was enacted, it has placed responsibility on the individual ministries, and therefore if you want, you have decentralized the corruption as well. In other words, people will follow where the money is because they want a favor. I
like the fact that you're saying you decentralize corruption,
yes.
And we shall perhaps delve deeper into that. President, Mwenda, and I know Mr. Mwelwa here will come in after you. When you interrogate the Auditor General's report, it doesn't matter which year you pick, irregularities around public procurement, they seem to always take, center stage. Why mustn't we fix this? It is a constant pain point for the nation. We are bleeding from there. Why are we failing to fix this? Is it deliberate?
Thank you. And as being a political leader, our interest is to make sure we give checks and balances. And as it has been rightly put, that corruption follows the money. And it is because governance is hinged on how we administrate things that matter to us most, in this case, procurement. So we cannot have governance, we cannot have leadership being judged to be excelling or succeeding if we don't see how they do their procurement. Then how is it that we can tell that the procurement is being done in a right or wrong way, or is it being done to the interest of the people or not? This is when we appreciate the place of our laws. We need to have the rule of law. And in this case, procurement is held down strong by the Procurement Act number 8 of 2020. That one is clear. It has got its shortfalls, but it now sets the tone. So most of these challenges that you have mentioned, which keep recurring, most of them are because of the way we have chosen not to administer the law that we have. Because the interest of the law is to make sure that procurement is fair, to make sure that there is integrity, and to make sure that there is public interest, because you are presiding over a country as a government in the interest of the people. So it is not a personal to other kind of a country, but it is a country whose owners are the same people you are administering to. So it is very important that when we are doing these procurements, they are done to the benefit of the people. And for it to be so, it means that our procurement systems need to have integrity, they need to be fair, and they need to appeal, and people are supposed to use them. But is that what is happening? You said no. We tend to see these Auditor General's report saying otherwise. And of course it incenses people because they see how their resources are not being utilized properly.
Right. Mr. Mwelo, I don't know if you have anything to add here, but as you add, I need for you also to, you are a procurement consultant, and that's what you have done. And so when we look at procurement in the public sphere, you have on one hand what we call the controlling officers, who are permanent secretaries, and on the other you have the Zambia Public Procurement Authority, PPAZ. But in my view, these are two strong gatekeepers. We shouldn't then have things falling through the cracks. But where do we get it wrong that you have a controlling officer? I watch Uncle Bob, I watch Parliament always grilling controlling officers in the form of PSs. Where did they go wrong when you have a PPAZ to control and oversee the process, and then you have an internal process where the PSs have to sign off? Where do we go wrong as a nation?
Thanks, Pastor. Just what Uncle Bob said, and that President Mwenda said, it's actually in line with that particular issue. You know, from the time we had tender board, you remember the old days of tender board, they were actually, making the law and also implementing procurement in the ministries. Tender board, okay? So they were able to ensure that things are correct there. When this new act was passed in 2008, as mentioned by Uncle Bob, is that responsibility of ZPPA going to implement procurement in ministries was missing. And we've said that. Personally, I've said it almost, this is 8th year in my speaking to the media. That issue has to be resolved. Right. You see. So as we speak right now, ZPP has to come up with the policy. They have to make sure the act is being followed. But you cannot control what you are doing. So ZPPA cannot be the buyers. See, they must be able to pick somebody who is buying and charge them. You see, but if they are the ones who make the laws, are the ones who are conducting, who are checking themselves, who are disciplining themselves, becomes very, very difficult.
Do you think that's where the problem is?
Yes. So now the issue that we have there, if I may just explain a little bit, is that when you see the report that you have just mentioned, the Auditor General's report that comes out, there's also procurement issues in there, mentioned left, right, and center in billions of kwacha, mentioned problems that are there in public procurement. Now, the problem that we have, Pastor, is that we have no anchor of procurement in the ministries, in public procurement, no anchor, no an individual who is responsible for procurement in all the ministries. This is why, if you notice all reports, they would say, President this bought this machine. They say, Minister Bob bought that machine. Because there's nobody else they can go to mention. They are not part of the process. The one who is in charge of procurement, if you want to lot, is actually the permanent secretary. So now, the person who is buying is a buyer, very lowly placed in government. See, let me give you an example. Because the management of finance that government has is a trilogy of three things. There is accounts, there is internal audit, and there's procurement. So if you're talking about us managing that money, these three issues are very, very critical. What has happened, Pastor, is that the Accountant General has been there, is in charge of all accounts across the public spec. Whether you are in Mwense, wherever you are responsible for that. That person is responsible for that. Now, that position was elevated to PS, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Internal audit is in the whole country. That position was also elevated to PS level. Procurement has remained like that. See, and the problem for me, as we discuss corruption, I think that's one of the issues. I'll explain that one later as you ask the question. But let me explain this one. Now, it means a person who is a buyer is a very junior in the process. Is the one actually who buys.
They can't make a decision. They are just told what to buy.
No, I mean, they follow a process, but the legitimate power is missing. See, when you elevated, for instance, if you're an accountant, right, you have a PS you're reporting to, and you have a problem with the PS. You call your accountant general and tell him about the PS level, so that the issues are, this is what happened. If you're internal audit, same. If you're a procurement, nobody reporting to. See, so that aspect has made corruption to endemic levels where we are. So you see, that particular buyer is actually very low graded in all ministries. No one is a director of procurement. The director of finance, the director of internal audit, no director of procurement. But that's a person who bought that item. So now, if I've got an issue with the PS, where do I go? If I make the noise, tomorrow morning, I'm transferred to Shangombo by PSMD, kicked out. See, so this whole thing, we've been come back and say, look, can we find a solution? How are we going to, like we used to have in Kaunda's days, you see, how are we going to make sure that the procurement is respected? Now, I know you're going to ask maybe later on as we speak, the money now is going where? The money now is going to constituencies. 26 million.
I don't want you to rush there.
All right, let me finish the point there. Let me finish the point there first.
Okay.
So now, the person who is in charge of procurement in the whole government, there's no anchor. So when we go to the Minister of Finance, I personally met almost all the ministers apart from the current one, and I tell them, look, how is procurement going to be addressed? Nobody to see. Nobody is responsible. You see, for instance, President HH had those training that he had training all those PSAs and whatever. Procurement was not one of them. So there is nobody in charge of procurement.
Uncle Bob, you are a former cabinet minister, and maybe what he's talking about is a bit closer to what your experience is. But he raises a very important issue that we should not, push aside. Every time there is a procurement issue, the person who is cited is a permanent secretary to answer, because legitimately so, they are the controlling officer. I have never seen ZPPA cited for any anomaly within government procurement process, and yet they're the authority. Why is that the case?
Yeah, let's go back to the question that you raised. I think you've made the point about the permanent secretary being a controlling officer. Now, let's just start from there, and then we can proceed to look at the alternatives, and some of it has been talked about by Mero. Now, the permanent secretary is the chief executive officer of a ministry or a department, as the case might be. While I agree totally with what Mero has just said regarding where the function of procurement falls in, I think the issue is that is only part of the problem. It's only part of the problem. Because the moment you politicize the role of a permanent secretary, who is your controlling officer, it becomes very, very difficult to deal with it, because he is the chief executive officer. So whether you're talking about a procurement person, you're talking about an accountant, they're all reporting to that individual. Right. The only difference is in their levels. Okay, it's in their levels. So having said that, there is another department, in fact, which is not for discussion today, but I can point out that ICT has come into the fore now, because this is the person who is providing, in inverted commas, the means of information manipulation and so on and so forth. But we shall deal with that. So the structure of within a ministry is also an issue that needs to be addressed in general terms. So let's come now to the issue of how that operates. I said that the moment you politicize it, it becomes difficult to manage. Why? Because the allegiance of that chief executive officer in that ministry or department is now to the political master, if you want to call it that. In other words, their supervisor, so on and so forth. But if you look at the instructions to ministers, in fact, ministers do not do any procurement. They rely on the permanent secretary.
But so, they issue instructions.
No. They don't have to. They need not to. But I'm just talking about the structure. However, when you go to Parliament, that minister has to answer about the procurement in his department or his ministry, although he is not in charge of procurement. Those are the instructions that come in the manuals that are given to ministers. You are not responsible for procurement. So the central person is now the PS. Let's go to another side that is very important in the procurement side. It's the money side. The accountant, the director of finance, director of, if you want, accounting and finance, is answerable to the permanent secretary. So if the permanent secretary says, can you do this? And he says no, it will end up with this, the point that Mwera made. You may be transferred, you may be called a subordinate, and so on and so forth. So there is a structural issue that needs to be dealt with in the civil service. In other words, to protect everybody. Now you've got a procurement person who is a professional in their own right. You've got an accountant who is also professional in their own right. You've got an ICT person who is also an expert and professional in their own right. So we need to recognize these skills and agree that the instructions that they're given, if they have to be dealt with like that with the permanent secretary, has to be such that the permanent secretary must commit it to writing. In other words, he is responsible, he takes responsibility. Now, the moment he's not an accountant, he's not a procurement specialist, he's not an ICT person, it means that that weakness is going to be reflected even in the permanent secretary's responsibilities and the manner in which it's executed. There's another side to this, and this is the following. Where is the integrity of this individual? For example, he may not be a professional in any of these principles. Procurement, finance, ICT, he's not a professional in any of those, not even in administration. What happens? To whom is he accountable? Professionally. To whom is he answerable? Professionally. And what tends to happen is that then they gravitate towards now the political affiliation, if you want to call it that. So there's not just the issue of the level, which I agree is a factor, but there's also the issue of the integrity of the individuals to say you are responsible, you take accountability, and also the processes and procedures that need to be followed in order to effect a legitimate procurement.
Here is a concern, Mr. Mwenda. Here is a concern. So we identified Procurement Act of 2008, perhaps had some gaps, and we're not, strong enough to handle a growing economy and the magnitude of the purchases that government has to do.
It had to do with this, Kennedy. It had the following to do with it. The 2008 devolved from the public procurement agency or authority, if you want to call it now, to the ministries, individual ministries.
Right.
That's why I said you have now decentralized the corruption as well.
Right. So that
let's just be clear about that.
Yes. Now that being the case, are we dealing then with a society that has got blatant disregard for the law? Because here is the Procurement Act of 2020. It stipulates what needs to be done, laid down procedure. But even in the glaring presence of all these fire tenders, inflated infrastructure pricing for roads and hospitals and all that, you still have an infamous fertilizer scandal that is receiving,
right on our hands.
Yes,
yeah,
that
sure.
is receiving lip service. One would have thought that those things should not be happening now that we are in a new government, and also we have a new law that strengthens public procurement. But we still have people discussing, it's in the public domain, that the procurement of fertilizer, as an example, is under questionable circumstances, and that could just be one. How much more is this happening? Is it a question of you politicians not having regard for the law? What's happening here?
Thank you. Actually, I'm elated to hear it from the insiders. I've never been a minister before. And the way he's articulating how the systems inside government interlinks and gives you this product. In all goodness, I'm an architect. And in my many years, not too many, just above a decade, 12, 10 years of practicing architecture, I've many times wanted to sell a service as a consultant to the government. I can assure you, to date, I've never done a single government project. And I'm a fairly good architect. I've got accolades. I've won competitions even across in this country. But when it comes to translating that privilege of hard work probably, and maybe gifting, for you to be a beneficiary of these government procurement systems, because they're supposed to serve the interest of the people, you come to realize that there's a big difference between what is supposed to be done and what is done.
Exactly done.
Such that if we concentrate so much to look at the law, how the system is supposed to work and how it really works, it is very interesting. Because one of the things that even the Act explains, that the use for the Procurement Act is to make sure that there's integrity. That's the beginning point, because if there would be no integrity in the management of the procurement systems, then the systems are as good as they're not there.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, that is the case where we are at. Those procurement systems are sustained, run, and managed by people. But the prerequisite for their success is that those people need to have integrity. They need to follow what is there, do what is right. But do people follow what is there? Do they do what is right?
Why? Let's just start on a little bit. Let me just start a little bit, because that is very important for us to acknowledge. First and foremost, within each procurement unit, whether at the ministry, department, or whatever it might be, there is what is called an evaluation committee that looks at what has been submitted, whether it's a limited tender or even single sourcing. That group, the evaluation team, is supposed to say, yes, we agree to this, it is a legitimate thing. One, it has complied with the law. But besides the law, there is the issue of the guidelines. There's the issue of the procedures that need to be followed. Now, most of the time we tend to look at the minister, the permanent secretary. It's not only at those levels that the corruption takes place. In fact, a lot of corruption takes place at a much lower level. The guys that are in purchasing, the guys that are in accounting, usually it has to be collusion of all these guys working together and sort of saying, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It tends to be like that. In other words, if it was an individual, the other person must be able to say, no, this can't happen. I do not agree with this because of the following. Now, this evaluation committee on procurement is such a critical thing, because if they say, yes, we've looked at these proposals that have been put forward, the tenders that we've opened, yes, they've complied with this, that, and the next, yet you will find that within there are specific interest groups, okay? So they may follow the law. They may follow even the procedures. Yet what comes out is still incorrect. Are you saying to me that the cases we have right now, the Zamra, the procurement of drugs, are you saying to me the guys didn't know that this stuff was wrong? How could they distribute it when in fact it was in quarantine? Just as an example. Obviously they knew. It was a collaboration. They were collaborating in the theft. They were colluding, as a matter of fact. So integrity becomes even more important than observing the law and the procedures that we talk about. Necessary as they are, and important as they are, which you need to have, because you have to have a basis upon which the law sort of hangs, so to say. So I just thought I would...
So Mr. Mwelwa, in the current framework of procurement, particularly the public one, since that's what our leaning is right now, where do you see gaps? Where do you think, as Uncle Bob says, these guys, they know, and they take advantage of the gaps? You are a procurement. Where do you think current public procurement takes advantage of those? What are these gaps?
Right. You see, Pastor, the problem that we have in public procurement is legitimate power. Who is responsible for that? Let me tell you, right now, ZPPA, like you said, they make the laws, they make the policies, they make sure those things, are followed, but they don't do the actual procurement. The Minister of Finance holds ZPPA, right? The new act that Bob and President Mwenda are saying, they are also in public domain. Who has ever seen, somebody explaining it anywhere else? But when we had the Public Finance Act 2018, remember it, every district had that issue been explained. That's a problem with procurement. You see, that's what I'm saying. See, nobody is taking it up. You know, nobody should give ZPP a lot of money to go and explain the public procurement that we have at the moment.
Are you saying it's a deliberate ploy?
No. I'm saying that we needed somebody responsible for procurement. You see, like for instance, if you are saying the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Finance is in charge of Minister of Finance. The finance is the whole country. That's what procurement is. That's what procurement is. You see, so now what I'm saying is that the Minister of Finance, do they really want to change? Do they want to do? There's no PS in charge of public procurement. You see, but what I'm saying is that has to change. So there must be somebody responsible for public procurement. There must be, let me finish, Pastor. There must be somebody who is going to make sure that things are followed. For instance, the Act. Let me tell you, we have an Act that is there right now. Even in 2008, that is mentioned, even the current one has actually said all procurements must have tenders only for the youth, have tenders only for the females, for the ladies, tenders only for the lame. It says that. Who was implementing it? No one. You know, if you look at any other acts that we have, Minerals Act, that we have 2015, says no one should buy anything that is manufactured in Zambia. The mines are buying out of the country, left, right, and center, against the act. Who's implementing it? No one. So this is why I'm saying that there must be an anchor of procurement in government. See, and without that, it's very difficult to police it, because ZPPA cannot go and control 600 buying units across the nation.
So,
you know,
but they should.
Yes,
they should. This is the point. You are making a good point, but the point is this: there was a ZPPA when the drugs were procured. What did they do in terms of procurement?
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is where I think that this is a structural issue that needs to be dealt with.
Let me explain.
Yeah.
ZPPA is not involved in procurement. Okay, ZPPA makes the laws, you know, and make sure those things are followed. There must
but
be.
I beg to differ.
Let me finish that, Pastor.
No, I need to make clarity with that. I beg to differ.
Go ahead.
I'm coming from a quasi parastatal in my previous life, and every time I am trying to buy something, I was made to write a justification that was submitted to ZPPA. So they are involved because ZPPA needed to approve before I can buy anything.
Okay.
I think that maybe you should make that point.
So now, let me explain that one. So ZPPA makes the laws. Okay. Now, this ZPPA was given the responsibility of checking, for instance, an example of direct bidding, single sourcing, one firm, right? They used to approve it, but it was not in the Act. It was not in the Act. Even the current one is not there. Okay, so ZPPA in fact has written to all buying units and say ZPPA has no role to play in approving who's supposed to be single sourced. Okay, so that decision is made by the ministry, by the procurement committee that side.
So are you saying ZPPA is a moribund institution that's got no power, it can't do anything?
No. What you're saying is that ZPPA is making the laws. So there must be somebody responsible in government. That's what I'm saying. It's like for instance any law firms. They have an issue, you know, for instance the auditor goes to check what's happening, right? So ZPPA is not buying. ZPPA is making the laws and the policies. So what is missing, Pastor, is who is responsible for implementing ZPPA's Act in government. There's no one responsible for that. That's what the problem is.
So gentlemen, to me it appears it's a deliberate ploy. Everyone in government knows that ZPP and procurement space is very loose.
Let
me hear from you.
Yeah, no, it's not everyone knows. No. Mora made a very valid point. The training, the exposure, the explanation, the requirement of compliance, it's a weakness which is not just in terms of procurement. It's a weakness in the entire government system, right? Because there are no specific manuals that say you are going to comply with this in this particular manner in all the ministries, in all the functions of government. There isn't any master, if you want, master direction, if you want. Okay? Because of that, we've ended up with the situation that Mera is talking about. So maybe as a way forward, just going forward, now you do have some benefits that have come about because of ICTs, the information communication technologies that are embedded within the software. All right? For instance, if somebody is procuring a particular threshold, above a particular threshold, you can say, this particular one, in your system of procurement, can you flag it? And the system will flag it to you, whether within the ministry or outside, and also ZPPA can be alerted to say this ministry is procuring this quality this value of goods and this quantity and this quality. Please check it out. We can do that. It can be done and incorporated. But Mwera's point, I think, is that there is not a single individual at the Ministry of Finance, which is what you're saying,
Yes.
who is supposed to oversee that. Ministry of Finance relies on ZPPA to supervise, to supervise. So it's a question of what is included in the ZPPA regulations, not just on policy, but also on procedure. If you see the difference between them.
So isn't those gaps the ones that are fueling?
It makes it vulnerable.
Yes,
Let's
yes.
put it this way. It exposes it.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it's not only that, because if the people have integrity, they can manage the system. If you lack integrity, you will not do it.
Yes.
And additionally, to look at the ZPPA authority as moribund, weak, is actually the opposite of what it really is. Because if you check section 13, subsection 1 of the number 8, 2020,
Yeah.
it actually gives superpowers.
Yeah,
it
that's
says the authority shall regulate, shall investigate. And I was so humbled to see that they've got power to investigate and the power to act. So now I was already thinking, say, okay, how can the same body be the regulator, be an investigator, and also act? When we just came, I was asking Mr. Matsa, how do they act on their investigation? Do they take to Anti-Corruption Commission? What do they mean by acting? But when you read further, I think in 19, if they can actually cancel a contract that they were not even part to, they can move in and cancel it. So they have been given these sweeping powers that the authority, if it is adequately empowered, it has got authority to oversee any procurement transaction that is happening.
Isn't that an anomaly already? Because how can you give so much sweeping power to an institution that doesn't even have a PS? Because really, you know, who do you answer to? How can you go and cancel a contract that has been authorized by a minister or a PS?
No,
minister is not involved.
Ministers get themselves involved. Let me put it that way. But they have no role according to the law. Let me just use the practical one that we have. We are procuring fertilizer. 2013, 2014, I was Minister of Agriculture. All right? Because I wanted to procure the fertilizer at a particular price, okay? I, as a minister, I knew that the price of fertilizer was around a certain figure on the international market. That's because of my training, okay? So I said, we're going to procure this. But the law does not allow me, neither do the guidelines to the ministers allow me to do the procurement. So I asked Secretary to Treasury, my permanent secretary, I said, can you guys go and check this for me? They went to Saudi Arabia to procure top dressing, urea, so to say. They got there and they called back, Minister, we found some fertilizer, this is the case. I said, well, all right, how much? Talk to me about the quantity. I said, what is the price? No, we haven't discussed that yet. I said, no, I would like to know what the price of that is, because I am going to be answerable to Parliament. So after they discussed that, they came back to me, oh, well, we've been able to negotiate, the figure is $425 per metric ton. We were procuring here, and that's the question you raised, we were procuring that fertilizer, that same fertilizer, at $1,079 per metric ton. 2.5 times more expensive than they found. So I said to them, I said, no, I want you to negotiate at least below $400, right? So they went back, negotiated, and they said, oh, Minister, we are happy to inform you that per your instructions, we have been able to get the fertilizer at 393.
Per your instructions.
Keyword. Because I did not say you must get it at this price, because I don't know. But I was saying I want it below a certain threshold. Why? Because I knew the price of fertilizers worldwide. Okay? So now, they came back, the 393 is what they negotiated. I said, fantastic, no problem. I said, now PS, before it arrives here, I don't want it to go beyond $500, including your freights, including your insurance, including all the other charges that go with it. Why? Because there is a cost. The people are contributing to it.
I need to ask you a question.
No, that's what
Yeah.
I'm dealing with a policy issue.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not
Let me
doing
add-
specific.
Let him add what he said.
Yeah.
I think
It's a policy issue.
his point is correct. The ministers
Minister
are
is
not
responsible
involved,
for policy.
but they are managing their own ministry. But let me add a
I want
point
us
in
to
there.
So let me just finish
I want us
this
to be
because
very
it will help
realistic.
us to understand what goes on. So the PS now knows that these are my thresholds. My job as minister, my role is to define what the policy will be. Why? Because there are farmers there who pay a certain amount of money which government subsidizes. That is my role as minister. I go to parliament, I present to parliament, this is what my ministry is going to do, this is what we're going to do for this year. So it is my responsibility. But I am not sitting there selecting the person to supply. I'm not sitting there telling them the price must be this much, there's a cut for me to know so much. No.
I appreciate, before you come in,
Yeah.
I appreciate your policy point of view. Very valid. But here is a challenge. Just imagine, Uncle Bob, you were still minister and
Yes.
that decision was made.
Yes.
How would you have reacted
To
if someone from procurement had to overrule a process within which the minister was involved?
no. There was no overruling anything. Because they have decided, they are the ones negotiating.
I think I can come in there.
No.
Actually, what is happening here is the authority, procurement authority, is a big brother. With all due respect, what happens with the powers with the minister as regards procurement, but when an employee or a participant feels aggrieved, it doesn't matter who's issuing the instruction.
Correct.
They can run to the big brother. They can report to the authority, and the authority has got the power to investigate. Even the instruction of the minister is subject to investigation.
No, exactly.
Even the instruction
Absolutely.
of the PS. Not
Anybody in the
because
system, yeah.
what is
Quite
happening
correct.
is the authority is setting rules, and it sets rules across the country.
You're right.
But we've
That's
had
quite
a
correct.
system where people, I think, as you were saying, people are not enlightened sufficiently. Like
correct.
other documents which have been put at their table, they think if the PS is allowed an anomaly to proceed, they think the person to confront is the same PS. No wonder they get transferred. No wonder there's such vindictive tendencies. There is a big brother here, the authority. And when people feel that they can't report, you are in a system and you see that the law is not being followed, I think you have the right to...
But that's incorporated in the regulations.
So now, can I just comment? Can I just comment?
Yeah,
Can I just comment and clarify those issues?
Let's hear from you.
Okay. That what Uncle Bob and President Bwenda is speaking are the problems. Let me explain. So the issue that we have here, we have internal auditor. Even the auditor goes to check how many years, 2 years behind. Okay, they produce a report, but the auditor is not involved in the process. He just checks, and the Dr. Chembe produces a very powerful report of the problems that are there in government. Okay, ZPPA is not involved in that process. See, they have to go and check over 500 procurement units. So who's responsible in government? That is what the problem is. So now I'll tell you the same issue. Let me just explain. The Auditor General goes to check what's happening in finance. But the whole government, as a finance person there, who is making sure everything is, we call him Accountant General, is making sure everything is done. So even if the ZPPA comes and notice the problem that you've encountered, in their research, is that what's going to happen there? No. So who is responsible? So ZPPA must be a very powerful institution. That is my recommendation personally.
Yes.
Even the Director General herself or himself must be the office that cannot be fired by anyone. He should be, when he arrives at the department, he must run away. You see, now the problem is that there's nobody responsible of procurement in government. That's why the problems are there. Because if it was an accounting issue, Accountant General will deal with it. If it's an internal audit issue, internal audit, although at the PS level, all these two positions I've mentioned, and 4 permanent secretaries in the Ministry of Finance, they will deal with that issue. Procurement, nothing. Let me tell you, if you have an issue to do with somebody to go and close a mine, who does that? Director of Mines is there. If you want somebody to go and talk about anything petroleum, Director of Petroleum. Procurement, nothing. in the structure of government. That's why he said, when you came over from tender board to ZPPA, we had that that problem, and that issue is still there.
That's
so,
why.
so the procurement fellow who's buying there has nowhere to report to. ZPPA is a regulator.
Somewhere to report to. He reports to the PS.
Yes.
But what we say, it's an enhancement.
No.
We need to enhance
Yeah.
it.
So the reporting I'm talking about is to do with procurement issues. Obviously, you're reporting to the
as a specialist function.
Who's reporting?
Yes. You're
Who's reporting to who?
No, what I'm saying is the procurement person in the Ministry of Finance or anywhere in the Ministry of any ministry reports to the PS.
To the PS,
Okay? Just like accountant also reports to what?
To the PS,
So if the accountant has a problem with the PS, he goes to the accountant general.
Actually, the reason why I asked that,
It's
it's a fair question, so I have to answer it together. Why I asked that is because when you're explaining it, I want you to expand it. Don't just look at the internal systems. I'm looking at other participants. Actually, that's where corruption really happens. It does not entirely happen within the systems only. There's an interaction between the sellers of those the people you are procuring things from. So that's what I want you to explain it, because you are talking about the reporting, you are talking about the person who's already a government employee reporting, but there is the scope doesn't end on him. There is also me who has tendered, and I've been scammed. I feel I should have been the one to supply something.
Okay, right. So now let me explain that aspect. So let me first finish the first point. So this particular procurement person in the ministry, he obviously runs the procurement and reports to the permanent secretary, hierarchically in the system, okay? Just like an accountant also reports to the permanent secretary in that process. So if an accountant has a problem with permanent secretary, goes where? Where he reports functionally to the procurement accountant general. So accountant general has an issue, speaks to that person, that issue is resolved. That's why if you see the auditor general's report, has very little to do with accounts. Okay? But the procurement, auditor general's report, number one problem there. See, any person who is mentioned in the auditor general's report is not charged. Nobody is even present. Nobody even come and say, you have done this, because the whole government structure is empty. So the point I'm making is that there am I, a junior. There's no director of procurement. Junior. There is the finance director, internal director, everyone. That junior there, procurement officer. They just tell him, you do the following. So now, let me finish the point. I'll answer your question. So if this person has a problem with how to manage it, has nowhere to go. ZPPA is a regulator. They are far away, So that's why we've been saying there must be a procurement general of all procurement issues to be able to manage that issue, because this person will call procurement general, sir. So let me tell you an example that I've already mentioned. ZPP has moved themselves away, which is in the Act. They will not provide guidance on direct bidding. We have just picked this firm are going to buy from. Who will make that decision? Procurement committees. Who is going to be making sure that it's correct? That means ZPP is not going to check all buying units every day. By the time they will finish it before years. So the point I'm making is there must be somebody who must make sure that things are followed properly.
So gentlemen, let me before you come in.
Even that person you can just supervise 600. That's why I said to you, what we're talking about is an enhancement. How do we solve the problem? How do we address it? I am not against the fact that we need to elevate this position into and even include ZPPA with the authority to be able to question everything through the procedures that they issue out.
So gentlemen, listening to you actually validates the concerns of the public that our public procurement is a mess.
It is a mess.
Because we have a law, quite all right. You have controlling officers, you have ZPPA, but you have all submitted that corruption doesn't even happen at this level. You have the architect.
It does,
let me finish. You have the architect. You have a road contractor. These are external. What role are they playing in all this? Because we're just looking at government. What about these ones? At what point do they dangle carrots?
Let me just answer that one.
Yes.
A little bit of that. I was a procurement director at Millennium Challenge. Okay? In there, the American money, that all these 10 projects we did, was $220 million only. Everything that we did. Procurement is that planning, is the actual process, and contract administration.
Right.
When the contract has been awarded, it's a procurement function. The problem that we have at the moment, we don't have that. So when a contract has been signed, a contract would have been $10 million. you know, when the buyer, you know, signs, when the contract is signed, they think the job is finished. That's when the job starts. Who's going to make sure that the variations are correct? Who's going to make sure, you know, you find something of 10 million, end up 100 million. Variation being done. Corruption is there. Right. So the point that we are saying is that in the new act at Millennium Challenge, we used to have what is called price reasonableness analysis. So if the price of this is 10 kwacha, I run a tender, the cheapest is 200 kwacha. I buy 200 kwacha. But I know the price is what? 10 kwacha. In the old act, the one you mentioned, 2008, I've not committed any problem. Even that fire tender, no problem committed. But the price of that fire tender, was it 1 million or $700,000? You see. So that issue, in the new act, it was in the old, no problem. In the new act, it says a person that before you award, you must perform price reasonableness analysis.
Is that happening?
Yes. So ZPPA is actually implementing that. They need support.
Did we
see,
go?
So now let me tell you.
Do that for the fertilizer that we're talking about.
No, I haven't reviewed that particular price.
No.
So, but let me explain before you ask me that question. Is that so? That price analysis, it means if anybody was making a road at $2 million per kilometer, and when you do price analysis, you find that it's $350,000 per kilometer, you go to prison for 5 years. So the act is saying. The question that we have, who is going to be implementing those things in? Let me first finish just one point. Who's going to be implementing those issues in the ministry?
We have 10 minutes to
so that person was analysis. You know, ZPPA would review what you're doing, but ZPPA must be able to call somebody. They cannot go and make sure that the whole government is, you know, there must be somebody responsible for that.
Let me address this to the politician. Uncle Bob is a retired politician, so I want to address him. Let me address to a politician who is vying, who is having for office. Right. Politicians, I think you are letting us down. I'm putting you on the spot on behalf of all of them. Because as you are in opposition, you will see all the wrongs and you promise to come and address them. When you step into the seat of power, those things begin to work in your favor and you justify them. Why do I say this? Not too long ago, people were campaigning, and there was this outcry about, and I cited it last week, the Public Order Act. It was condemned. Today, you have people in government who are saying it's a good piece of legislation. Could it be the case also with procurement? Everyone now, even the PF, knew the lacunas, but they capitalized on that, and they'll say, we cannot disclose our source of funding, and maybe perhaps they're just using government contract. And now it's happening maybe in the new administration. The new administration perhaps should be fixing these things on behalf of the politicians, really, honestly and objectively.
As we had said it at the beginning, all our systems are hinged on integrity.
That's right.
You can have the perfect systems.
Yeah.
You can have the perfect law. But if there's no integrity, he keeps bringing out something very important. It could not be embedded in our systems. Correct. That there is no ZPPA representative in every department is saying they can't be supervising 600, 700, 1,000 procurement transactions. They can't. But one thing that every Zambian is supposed to know is that every Zambian, regardless of your position, you are an agent, for lack of better terms, of ZPPA. You have a duty by virtue of you being actively or even just passively part of a transaction. If you notice anything, if you notice an anomaly, if you notice things which are not conforming to the guidelines, to the law, you don't need to have ZPPA to come and discover that. You could be a junior officer right there at the bottom, but if you see that this instruction is adverse to the law, you have a duty as a citizen. We need to have a mindset that people should understand and appreciate that these systems we have who can only be made to work by people. There will always be flaws. Even if you employed 1,000 people from ZPPA, they can also be corrupt. Yeah. But if individual people were participating, you know, I remember there was time I was looking for, I applied for a certain tender. You know who came to me? A woman who was actually just a cleaner said, don't worry, just leave your papers, I'll get back to you. So that's how much the system is dependent on people. So if I was supposed to have reported that person. It's many years ago, and I didn't report. I'm saying it was my failure to report that probably has allowed that
continue. But this has continued to happen. Even us, when we get into power, you put me on the spot.
Yes.
As politicians,
Yes.
people should know that politicians are not gods. Even if there's a new regime which has come in, this regime will only be put to task and work by the people that are there in the systems.
Uncle Paul,
Remember what we've said.
before you make, I want you to say what you want to say, but I want also to marry it with this. With all the things that we have talked about that makes our public procurement so flawed, what is it that we can do as a nation to correct it? Because we are bleeding public resources.
Right.
Like, I mean, we shouldn't be talking about all these deficits if we could only manage what is in that budget. 70% would be sufficient to cover this nation, but what must we do to fix it?
Well, first and foremost, there is no replacement to strong laws and regulations. There's no replacement to that. But above all, the issue of integrity is key. When I was minister, you know, people would bring with them what would be regarded as small presents in inverted commas.
I remember.
Right? I don't want anybody to come in this one with a bag. I don't want it.
I remember that. I was sent to bring you a phone.
Yeah.
As a minister,
Yeah.
and you said, no, how much is it, first of all?
First and foremost, who is giving me this phone?
Yeah.
Because as minister, I'm allocated a phone from cabinet office. I have a phone. In fact, for the first time, the secretary to cabinet, I said to him, I said, there is a phone that has come from Zamtel. Okay? Zamtel is a parastatal. Why is Zamtel giving us phones when we as ministers have got these phones? So I wrote to the Secretary of Cabinet and I said, I want you to know that Zamtel has sent a phone to me. You guide me on how we're supposed to deal with the parastatals, because they have no responsibility whatsoever to give us anything whatsoever. And as a result of that, we started having a form which every minister must sign. And I said, in order to avoid that, I don't want anybody to bring anything into my office. Okay? Whether it's a camera or whatever. But there are those that the president has just talked about here. That they come behind the back and say, can we make this deal? 50-50. If you have no integrity, this is what has happened in the PF government, right? Some of it is happening right now. How do you buy fertilizer at $1,400 per metric ton? Fertilizer that you're getting at less than $400. How?
There should be some kickbacks.
Well, you will be pleased to hear this. In the audit and in the Public Finance Act, there is a provision. The provision is the following. The internal audits are supposed to help to verify value for money. Value for money. If we are paying double that amount, even 1.5 times that amount that we're supposed to pay, it's not value for money. We ought to make sure that what we're procuring is of, shall we say, appropriate value. Now you ask the question, how do we correct it? This is what I said to you. We can use ICT now to control it, not depending on the individual, but depending on an impartial system that sits there in the system and checks and says to you, no, this is not acceptable, raise a question mark, red flag. And then, of course, you've got people that are responsible who can now read that information, right? They'll read that information and say, wait a minute, it's my duty when the flag is raised like this. That's the second part.
Yeah.
The third part, obviously, is to make it public. This thing of secrecy is a problem. Let me share with you my experience as minister. I went to Rwanda. And one of the things that I learned from Rwanda was how the president made sure that every minister in every ministry, if they are procuring, they will come with their permanent secretary, they will come and present to cabinet committee what they want to purchase. It becomes now a public issue. It's a public issue and say, we want each one of you to sign that you have agreed to this. Now, when people have to sign for something, they become very careful. They don't want to sign something because then they are accountable to it. So they are very careful. No, we cannot agree with this. No, we don't agree with this. It can't be $2 million per kilometer because we know that in South Africa they are doing it for $750. Take the road, for example, to Dangote cement factory in Ndola. They constructed that road from the Dollar Lusaka Road to their premises at $750,000 per kilometer. How is that possible? That we are paying double, 3 times that.
Yeah.
So in other words, what I'm saying is that if you bring it out in the open, it becomes very difficult to conceal it. The moment you say you enclose it and say it's going to be done secretly, we are deciding no. It becomes a big problem.
Right.
So in terms of suggestions, I've given you 3 suggestions.
Yes.
Make it public, put in the systems that are necessary. You need to have what Mwero is just talking about, verification. In other words, it's my responsibility to make sure there's a flag that is raised and make sure that anybody who issues the instructions signs for those instructions.
So-
and they cannot be verbal.
So you both said earlier as we were starting that corruption follows where the money
Yeah, sure,
is.
sure.
So 25 million, 25.7 million going to CDF now, is it? Is it 25 or 27?
Yes.
Let's say
25.7.
25.7 going to
That would be another
constituencies.
problem.
Let me, yes, and that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
Because we have procurement problems, and as we have heard from the submission of Mr. Mwero, there is no
Specific
accountant general
office, yeah.
risk,
Procurement general.
yeah, procurement general, to go and certify what's happening at constituency level. 156 constituencies countrywide.
61.
Okay.
61.
161
61.
constituencies. Okay. Now, all of those having 25.7 million. No ICT involved.
Yeah.
Guidelines have been issued.
But they're not explained.
Not explained. There's a law also that guides.
Yes.
So before you come in, let me speak. I saw something that you wrote on your page. The guidelines as far as disbursement of CDF is there. There is also a law that guides CDF administration. How are the two harmonized? And now that we are talking about corruption, what do you foresee happening?
Well, according to the law, because you can never operate outside the law.
Yes.
Anything that happens outside the law is illegal and should not happen. But we have situations here. I think there are lapses by the government, maybe it's lack of planning, but they have gone ahead.
We call them lacunas.
Yeah, lacunas. Because the challenge now is, for instance, the 25 has not even gone.
Yeah.
But in the act, that's the CDF Act number 18 of 2008, I think so. It is clear that all submissions for procurement should have been concluded by March. Meaning, if you intend to do a road, you should have done reconnaissance survey, you should have had people tender for it, you should have,
Evaluation
have even found at least a position where, as you are saying, you should have done, I like what you said, you should have done your own, as the procurement department, you should have at least researched on it and known how much it's supposed to cost before you even invite bids. So now, it looks like all those things, this is February, after we're even ending, have to happen in the next
Less than 1 month.
1 month.
Yeah.
I'm an architect. For you to design for a road, it will take you not less than 3 months. Even when you have to make application to the council.
You can't vary the law?
Of course, the law can be varied. But the point is, that's why you need systems, Kennedy. You need systems that are reasonable, that can be verified, and you have to state, these are the instructions. And this is why you take
What do you mean
Mwero was
varying the
explaining.
law? I think, let me
You
just
can vary
get
the
that.
law.
Yeah, but let me hear
But it
what
must
context
be
he
done
meant.
without a specific contract in mind. It must be general application.
So in this case, what was your question? Say,
My
can you vary
question
the law?
is, you are citing the dates that have been put in the act, that
Yes.
by March and whatnot. But if the funds are there, and as we know that the budget has been presented and approved, it's there. Must we wait for all the processes to be? How do we harmonize the guidelines and the law that is to the letter? Or we could say, okay, this is what the law says, but we will waiver this process and that process.
The moment you start wavering, you are running into problems. We should just have proper procedures, guidelines, systems put in place so that they are flexible to the extent that they allow for time to do this proper sequencing, if you want, of their various activities. And this is why, when we're talking about having an office that is doing what? Supervising those processes. and not expect that they will be done in 1 month, because they won't be done. Everybody knows that. And the moment you haven't done it, you are breaking the law.
Mr. Mwerwa, CDF management from a procurement perspective.
Okay, Pastor, look, President Sata, I think when he started, actually the Secretary of Cabinet did write a letter to the Minister of Finance and said that go and create what he called procurement controller and many other positions. All the finance positions were filled. Procurement controller still empty. I have that letter that was written by the Minister of Finance. It wasn't done. This is why I personally am worried with the fact that we are not managing procurement as the Minister of Finance way. Okay? So President Hakainde himself has been talking about three things. He says price, quality, and timeline. The three elements that he's been talking about. That's procurement. You see, and those triangles, actually I call it HS golden triangle. We need to achieve those things. How do you achieve those things if there is no one in charge of procurement? See, the president himself has a lot of permanent secretaries that are special duties. One of them should be procurement. One of those persons should be procurement to make sure that things are managed to the level. Now, let me tell you, when you go down to CDF now, 20 how much? 26 million. 25 million has been taken out to the council to buy.
Not 26.
Say for Lusaka, how many members of parliament do you have here at the constituency? 7? 26 multiplied by 7, that money are going to be handled at the city council. I come from Mwense. Mwense will have almost $50 million, $50 million kwacha being handled by the council. Who they have there?
That's right.
Whom they have there? They have a very junior boy called procurement officer. They've got a director of finance. They've got a director of engineering. All these directors' positions are powerful. Procurement, cleaning their shoes. That's what the problem is. That's what corruption is. Yeah, I'm telling you that. So what's going to happen, remember this discussion, if that issue is not resolved, and then we take all those monies to be bought in those constituencies, you'll be shocked when Dr. Chembe goes there to check what result is going to come out from there. So we have to make sure that we manage that particular process. We have to make sure that procurement is properly done, because supervision is done by procurement to make sure contract administration is done by procurement. So we have to revert that position.
We have 7 minutes as we conclude the discussion. A lot to talk about, but I want us to move a little bit from public procurement, because we've established it's a mess and it needs to be fixed. Uncle Bob has submitted 3 solution systems.
Well, the fourth one is, of course, the issue of the management. You remember I said it's a structural issue.
It's structural
It ought
issue.
to be addressed.
Right.
There's no two ways about it.
Yes.
It ought to be addressed.
Now, so if government is bleeding from a public procurement process, it is also bleeding from a public procurement, a private procurement process. Take, for example, the mines. Uncle Bob, you worked in the mine. You worked in the mine. They will continue declaring losses and losses. They're manipulating the
system,
the procurement system, and so they cannot, give tax to the government. So where do we run to if we can't collect tax because of procurement, lacunas? We cannot, plug where we are bleeding. I think we are a finished nation.
Pastor, let me just add one comment there. You see, in the current government, we have SME industries, SME minister of small scale industry. That is, this man. That's a solution to our economic management. There must be a lot of SMEs that are going to support. Who's going to support them? It's procurement. See, I remember one time in the mines when we were forced somehow that if somebody is grinding, buying some grinding media from them, and buying from South Africa, we maybe give 10% to a grinding media in Zambia, supporting them. SME. It's the SME industry is going to only to grow if procurement is honest. You see, but now people don't do that anymore. Nobody supports anyone. You see, the youth. I've been in all my Sunday interviews at ZNBC. I've mentioned the issue. Why are we buying desks from China? 2 billion.
Because they'll give you a
so now, what has happened now, carpenters making those desks. I've been saying that many years. So now the issue is, let's see how we can promote SMEs in this country. Now, in government, if you take now private sector, say the mines, let's just give an example of the mines. So the mines contribute 60% of our forex, right? Yeah. So it's very, very important. And the new budget is talking about us getting 20% of the profits made by the mines. So when they are buying, nobody's knowing what they're buying. You see, if they are buying a machine that is for 20,000 kwacha, in their document 2 million kwacha, when they come and put their documentation, they've made a loss. So which means that 20% they're trying to get, you won't get it. Even if they are paying royalties, I know they're paying royalties, but that money they pay as royalties is now subtracting to the cost. So which means you will not get the money out of the mines. That's why I've been saying that we have to go and see how they are doing procurement. That's why one of my recommendations is that there must be somebody responsible for that process.
Has anyone gone from government to say,
procurement? No.
Can you show us where you're buying this equipment?
Nobody is responsible for that. I've told you already. First of all, there's no PS in charge of procurement. There's no advisor to the president in charge of procurement. All the others are there. You see,
including COVID.
Yeah, of course, COVID is a problem. But I'm saying that there must be somebody advising how we're going to deal with that. I personally, I've met a lot of advisors to the president, and I've told them this issue. I don't know if they've told you. Even President Lungu, President HH have done that. Because if they don't do that, there will be nothing out of the mines. Nothing. Because they will be clearing, if they've made losses, Pastor,
yes,
for the past 20 years, why are they still mining?
Uncle Bob, your last remarks as we begin to wind down.
Yeah. Well, clearly, there's a lot to be done in terms of polishing up and cleaning up the whole procurement system. Very, very important to do that. But let me make specific reference to what you have said. We've been through this road before. In 1969, 1970, so some of you, I think, you are not there. But
yeah.
During that time, President Kaunda decided to implement what was called the economic reforms.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, there was a deliberate policy which said anything above a certain threshold would go to locals.
Yes.
This is how a lot of people on the copper belt were cleaning for the mines.
That's what I'm talking about.
I understand. I'm buttressing what you said.
Yeah.
And that's how they really became well-to-do. The likes of B.Y. Wheelers and Jishimbas and so many others benefited from that. So it's a policy issue that can be done. All right? But you need to also ensure that governments work under pressure. Kennedy, there's no two ways about it. They always respond to pressure. So there has to be pressure even from the small and medium-sized enterprises to say, we want to be recognized. Yes, you've got a ministry, but we want more than that. We want it to have a specific component. And fortunately for us, unfortunately, but fortunately for us, we do even have a law in place. It's called the CEE Act of 2008. Okay? Which is talking about empowerment of local people. A certain percentage must go to local people. It's already there. The
you have to be a politician.
No. But the law is there.
I know, but how many
know
people?
Who the minister in charge is? The president. Okay, the president is the minister in charge. The minister of commerce can, in fact, specifically say these sectors are only for the locals. You can declare that, but it obviously has to go to cabinet and make sure that that's done. So those possibilities are there. You may also remember that I worked for the mines, and you may remember that there was a system that the local mines under ZCCM, we had an office in Johannesburg to procure on behalf of ZCCM. We had an office in London where you remember that.
You got it, Tech Pro.
Yeah, that's right. We also had it in Europe. It was located in France.
Yes.
Partly it was in the office of SCCC. Okay. In other words, there was a specific thing that was done. There was another component that we did which will help what Mero is just talking about. It was called SGS. A company called SGS. You could not buy something which has not been inspected by SGS. You remember that?
Yes.
So, in other words, they will give their own report, independent report, that if that's what you're buying, we also know there is another place where you can buy the same commodity cheaper. It was, if you may remember, there was Crown agents, right, that were responsible for this. So all these were instituted to protect and to safeguard that what you are procuring was a reasonable level, and therefore it minimized the corruption that we're seeing at the moment.
Right.
So in terms of what the question you raised, that is where we're to go. The worry that I have, for example, locally now let's go to SMEs locally. You're talking about CDF. Unless there are systems put in place to manage that, it will be disastrous. Because now you're not even talking about people that are educated thieves. You're also talking about people that are incompetent because they don't know. Because the thefts that are taking place now at ministries, are not taking place because people don't know. It's because people know.
No.
They've got companies. You've got employees in those ministries that have all actually got companies. They own the companies, and so they buy from them. So the issue of integrity that had been talked about is crucial in all this procurement. Yes, we do need somebody. Yes, we need somebody to direct it. Yes, we need structural changes to be made. But if they lack integrity, the problem will still be the same.
Under a minute, public procurement and corruption.
Actually, I'm so glad I shared stage with these special people of this country. I think if I were to leave this stage, the last thing I would want to echo strongly is to appreciate the fact that we could be enjoying privilege as a country to develop. But one thing that I've seen that is so strong that I feel should be rooted out at all cost is our carelessness, lack of discipline. When policy contradicts the law, there is no two-way. Policy falls off.
That's right.
The law
That's correct.
stands.
That's correct.
There is a lot of indiscipline. People even plan to fail. For instance, the issue of planning when you know you are remaining with 1 month and you initiate programs that would have required 4 months, and when you expect that when you reach, we find that the law does not permit you vary it. The processes of varying the law are very different. They are not actually related to that policy. I'm a law scholar. They are not related to that. So you cannot bank on moving.
You start cutting corners.
Yeah, you do not bank on trying to move a deadline because there are means and ways to move a deadline. That's how corruption is.
That's right.
When you are in a race and you see that you are being beaten, you start banking on how you move the boundary, the finishing point. You know, we'll move the finish, so I'll catch up. That is actually corruption is. So if we can plan with a view that will not stand by the law, that actually is the prima facie place where corruption starts. And if this country is to go anywhere productive, people should respect the law. They should know that we are bound by the law. It is supreme and no one is above it. Anything that we do to move the law is actually criminal, especially if it happens in a way that we would have planned. So what this government is doing concerning the CDF is highly illegal. They do not have mandate. The minister has been abrogating, even going to an extent of going to decide what the CDF should be used. They said, no, we'll buy 4x4. Who gave him that power? That's a preserve of the people in the wards. They are the ones that allow that channel. They can start speaking about their money and, you know, elevate to say, as we want a 4x4. People in Chile will say, want a speedboat, we've got too much water. But where we see indiscipline, where a minister would even put in guidelines, say, we'll buy 4x4, that is punishable. If our president, that is punishable. So this lack of discipline, where people think they are gods because they've got political power, should end at all costs. And this is what we have seen, the path that this government has taken, where people are demigods. Once you are given the mandate to preside over affairs of the people, the power still remains with the people.
You've run out of time. Under a minute, your concluding remarks.
Okay. President HH himself mentioned that there's some building that was being done somewhere, I think in Northern Province or something, and it was something like 800,000 or something. Supposed to be, yeah. So whatever he's saying is actually the greatest problem that we have. See, but the president is not going to monitor 10,000 buyers across the country. No, there must be somebody. There must be somebody who's going to make sure that those issues that President Akainde is talking about are fulfilled. Is the HS Golden Triangle has to be met, cost, quality, and timeline by somebody. See, this is why I'm saying that whatever that we are talking about procurement, the corruption that is in procurement, it's very possible that some people in the current government don't want to implement those, so that we continue having a problem. But if you ask me, the solutions for development of this country is procurement.
State of the Nation says public procurement is a mess. Thank you so much for watching, and I would like to thank my panelists. President Mwenda, thank you so much for coming. Elder Statesman, Bob Sichinga, thank you, sir, for your time. And of course, our consultant, procurement specialist, Mr. Chiwe Mwelwa. Thank you for making the discussion very fruitful for our viewers. Until next time, please be sure to join us every Thursday, 20 hours for State of the Nation. My name, Kenneth Mambwe. Bye-bye for now.
Oh.